The sea always had a way of silencing secrets. Maybe that's why no one in Brighton Shores heard the whispers until it was far too late. Detective Thomas Riley had served the coastal town for over 2 decades. He was the kind of man people trusted, a quiet storm in a badge and trench coat. But even storms lose their way. He spent most of his evenings alone now. The house echoed with memories of a marriage that had unraveled silently over the years, paper-thin conversations, missed dinners, and eventually, separate bedrooms. His wife, Elaine, a local high school English teacher, had once called him the most dependable man in the world. That was before the distance between them became a canyon. So when Sheriff Douglas Hartley asked Riley to look after his son, Aidan, just 17, angry at the world, slipping through his fingers, Thomas didn't hesitate. It started as a mentoring program. Weekly meetings in Thomas's office. Aidan was brash and restless, but sharp. Thomas saw something in him, something familiar. A flicker of pain he recognized but never dared name. What began as simple guidance turned into deeper conversations, about loss, confusion, identity, and the aching silence in both their homes. Then came the rides along the shoreline, dinners at roadside diners, hours in quiet company with no obligations or judgment. And somewhere along the way, a boundary blurred. Thomas couldn't remember the exact moment it shifted. Maybe it was the way Aidan started showing up unannounced, needing to talk. Or the way he lingered after conversations ended. Perhaps it was the night Aidan cried, confessing he'd never felt safe with anyone before. That night, Thomas crossed a line he could never uncross. They kept it quiet. No texts, no photos. Just brief touches when no one was watching, and whispered conversations under the roar of ocean waves. Thomas knew it was wrong, on every level. The age difference, the position of trust, the power imbalance. But in those quiet moments, the ethics blurred under the weight of loneliness. Aidan clung to him, needing something stable. Thomas gave it, believing, foolishly, that no one would ever find out. That he could be the exception to a rule carved in stone. But secrets have a way of surfacing in small towns, especially ones watched by a father who has eyes everywhere. Sheriff Hartley wasn't blind. He noticed the change in his son, how Aidan came home late, spoke less, and smiled only when his phone buzzed with a private message. The sheriff wasn't a man given to fantasy or hysteria. He gathered facts the way a hunter stalks prey, slowly, patiently, and with deadly precision. It started with a shared glance he wasn't meant to see. Then a voice memo Aidan forgot to delete. Then a GPS record on Aidan's truck showing multiple late-night visits to Thomas Riley Street. He didn't confront them right away. Instead, he waited, boiling in silence, spiraling in dread. The confrontation came one rainy Friday night, inside the abandoned fishing warehouse at the edge of Brighton Shores. Sheriff Hartley lured Thomas there under the pretense of a break-in. Aidan followed soon after, having been told by his father they needed to talk, just the three of them. The warehouse smelled of salt, rust, and betrayal. What happened inside that building would mark the town forever. Rain lashed against the tin roof as the waves crashed somewhere just beyond the warped wooden walls. Inside the old fishing warehouse, the air was damp and cold, chilled not only by the weather, but by what hung unspoken between the three men standing beneath flickering overhead lights. Detective Thomas Riley arrived first, flashlight in hand, expecting to check out a routine break-in. But the moment he stepped inside and saw Sheriff Hartley waiting in the shadows, something in his gut turned cold. "A break-in?" Thomas asked, voice steady, masking the ripple of dread climbing his spine. "No," Sheriff Hartley replied, stepping forward. "Not exactly." The door creaked again. Aidan entered, hoodie-soaked, his face pale beneath the flicker of faulty bulbs. His eyes darted between the two men, father and, whatever Thomas had become. Thomas turned to him immediately. "Aidan, what is this?" Aidan opened his mouth, but no words came. His lips trembled, eyes brimming with tears. Sheriff Hartley stepped between them, his jaw clenched so tightly the veins in his neck bulged. "I know," he said, calm, too calm. "I know everything." Thomas inhaled slowly. "Doug, listen to me. Don't you say my name," the sheriff snapped, voice sharp and sudden. "You don't get to say my name after what you've done." Thomas held his ground. "It wasn't predatory. It wasn't manipulation. You think I planned this? You think I wanted it to happen?" The sheriff's eyes flashed with fury. "You're a detective. A grown man. My colleague. You mentored my son." His voice cracked. "You were supposed to help him." "I did," Thomas said quietly. "No. You helped yourself." Aiden stepped forward. "Dad, stop." "You," Hartley barked, turning on his son. "You don't speak." Aiden flinched. Thomas instinctively moved toward him, but Hartley raised a hand. "Don't." Silence fell. The storm outside raged louder. Thomas looked at him. "What do you want, Doug?" Sheriff Hartley pulled something from his coat pocket, a wrench. Heavy. Rusted. He let it swing slightly in his grip. Thomas's eyes dropped to the tool. "Don't do this." "This isn't about revenge," Hartley said, voice hollow. "This is about survival. You think I don't know what happens when this gets out? When the news finds out? My son. A minor. And you. A public servant." He took a step closer. "Your face will be on every screen. Headlines will scream your name. But they won't stop there. They'll come for him. They'll call him weak. Confused. Sick." Thomas's voice trembled now. "Don't make this worse than it already is." Hartley looked at Aiden, then back to Thomas. "I'm doing what you should have done. I'm protecting him." It happened fast. The wrench swung in a sharp arc. Thomas tried to move, too late. The metal struck him across the temple. A sickening crack echoed through the warehouse. Aiden screamed. "No!" Thomas staggered, blood blooming from his scalp. Another blow. Then another. He collapsed to the ground. Aiden dropped beside him, sobbing. "Please, Dad, stop." But it was over. Thomas Riley lay motionless, eyes half-lidded, blood soaking into the cracked concrete floor. Sheriff Hartley stood over the body, chest heaving, the wrench slipping from his grasp with a loud clang. For a moment, no one spoke. Then, in a chillingly calm voice, Hartley said, "We say it was a robbery. He was working late. Someone broke in. It went wrong." Aiden couldn't speak. Could barely breathe. Sheriff Hartley grabbed his son's shoulders. "You hear me? You don't say a word. You don't ruin your life for this man." But Aiden's face said it all. He was already broken. The plan moved quickly. The sheriff staged the scene, tipped over chairs, smashed a filing cabinet, took Thomas's wallet, wiped prints. He left the wrench behind. Aiden followed him out into the rain like a ghost. By morning, the whole town would know. A respected detective, found murdered in a break-in gone wrong. But the sea never keeps secrets forever. Detective Thomas Riley's death hit Brighton shores like a rogue wave. The kind that knocks you off your feet even when the sky looks clear. The official report, signed off by none other than Sheriff Douglas Hartley himself, stated it plainly: victim was killed during a robbery. Evidence suggests the perpetrator was seeking valuables. No suspects at this time. But beneath the surface, quiet suspicions began to stir. The crime scene felt wrong. Forensics officers found the detective's office ransacked, but too neatly. A coffee mug still sat untouched on the corner of the desk. A single drawer was open, papers scattered just enough to look messy, but not enough to make sense. The killer had taken Thomas's wallet and badge, but left behind the most valuable item, his department-issued firearm, fully loaded, still holstered beneath his desk. And the murder weapon, a rusted wrench, was left lying beside the body. No gloves. No attempt to remove it. Detective Lisa Hendricks, Thomas's former partner, was the first to raise questions. She'd known him for over a decade. Knew he was meticulous, cautious. A man who locked his doors twice and never worked late without alerting dispatch. She stood at the warehouse crime scene days later, the place still echoing with the scent of salt and stale blood. This wasn't a robbery, she muttered to herself. This was personal. Lisa requested CCTV footage from nearby street cameras. Sheriff Hartley, visibly on edge, pushed back. "We're already stretched thin. Prioritize canvassing known break-ins," he insisted, his voice tight. But Lisa persisted. 3 blocks from the warehouse, she found a grainy traffic cam that showed 2 vehicles arriving around the same time, Thomas's department car, and the sheriff's own SUV. Time stamped, 9:41 p.m. That wasn't in the report. Lisa confronted Hartley the next morning. He didn't blink. "I stopped by after dispatch called in the break-in," he said. "Didn't find anything. Left before Thomas got there." "But there's no record of a call from dispatch," Lisa replied, narrowing her eyes. Hartley stiffened. Maybe it was a miscommunication. Lisa didn't argue. But she didn't believe him either. Then came the autopsy. The coroner's report described the blunt force trauma as excessive, multiple blows to the skull, delivered with high emotional intensity. The kind of attack that spoke of rage, not desperation. A thief might strike once, maybe twice. This was overkill. Word began to trickle through the department. Lisa spoke to forensics techs, to night shift officers who remembered seeing the sheriff pacing the hallway hours after the murder, sweating, agitated, mumbling to himself. And then there was Aiden. The boy hadn't returned to school. Neighbors said he hadn't been seen in days. His phone was off. His mother, long divorced from the sheriff, couldn't get a hold of him. When Lisa visited the Hartley residence, Aiden wasn't there. Sheriff Hartley claimed his son had gone to stay with relatives up north. No address. No contact number. Lisa didn't push, not yet. But her gut screamed the truth. Something was being buried. And Aiden might be the key. That same night, Lisa sat alone in her office, reviewing Thomas's case notes from the past few months. At the very bottom of the stack, she found a sealed envelope marked "Private." Inside were handwritten notes. Dates. Locations. Mentions of late-night meetings. One entry stood out. Friday, 9 p.m., Aiden asked to meet again. Said he couldn't handle the secrecy. Told him we'd figure it out. The last entry. Dated the night Thomas died. Lisa stared at the page for a long time. The storm wasn't just about to break, it had already begun. The town of Brighton Shores was still mourning Detective Riley, but beneath the layers of grief and solemn tributes, something darker had begun to churn. Detective Lisa Hendricks now knew she was sitting on something explosive, a connection between Thomas Riley and Sheriff Hartley's son that had never made it into any official record. And the harder she pulled at the thread, the more the whole story began to unravel. Lisa's next step was quiet. Strategic. She obtained a warrant for Thomas's home computer, sealed tight behind the digital security only someone like Thomas would use. It took the department's IT specialist 3 days to crack it. What they found wasn't just notes. There were voice memos. Recordings. Some sounded like therapy sessions, Thomas speaking gently, coaching Aiden through waves of guilt, fear, and confusion. But it wasn't professional distance. The tone was too intimate. The pauses too loaded. One recording in particular stopped Lisa cold. Audio begins, faint sound of waves, car humming in background. Aiden's voice, I wish it could just be normal. Us. Without all the hiding. Thomas, I know. I wish that too. But we have to be careful. If your father ever, Aiden, he knows. He won't say it, but I see it in his face. He's watching everything I do now. Thomas, then we need to stop. Before this destroys you. Aiden, quietly, it already has. There it was. Clear. Irrefutable. Lisa stared at the screen for a long time before saving the file to a secure drive. Her hand trembled slightly as she set it down. What had started as a tragic murder investigation was shifting into something far more damning. That same afternoon, she finally got what she'd been waiting for, traffic camera footage from the South Harbor exit. It showed the sheriff's SUV leaving the warehouse 20 minutes after Thomas arrived, and Aiden's truck not long after that. The final piece came unexpectedly, when a call came in from a hospital just outside town. Aiden Hartley had checked himself into a private trauma center. Under a false name. Lisa made the 2-hour drive alone, heart pounding the whole way. When she arrived, Aiden was curled up in a quiet therapy wing, looking more like a ghost than a boy. Hollow-eyed, silent, wrists faintly scarred. He didn't ask why she came. He already knew. I tried to forget it, he whispered, voice brittle. But it's all still there. Every second. The blood. The sound of the wrench. The way he looked at me afterward, like it was my fault. Lisa sat beside him, carefully. Aiden, I need to know what happened that night. Tears welled in his eyes. He said he was saving me. That no one would believe I didn't ask for it. That they'd say I ruined my life. He told me I had to stay quiet. You don't have to protect him anymore, she said. It's not your burden to carry. Aiden reached into his backpack and pulled out a small flash drive. He didn't know I was recording. Lisa took it without a word. Hours later, in her office, she pressed play. Sheriff Hartley's voice, he had to go, Aiden. He made you weak. He would have destroyed your future. Aiden, sobbing, you killed him. Hartley, I saved you. You'll understand someday. You just have to keep quiet. No one needs to know the truth. Not if you want your life back. It was over. Sheriff Hartley had confessed, to his own son. Caught on tape. Lisa stared at the screen as the recording ended. Thomas Riley hadn't just died. He'd been silenced. But now, the silence was broken. Sheriff Douglas Hartley's reputation in Brighton Shores had been ironclad, honorable, unshakable, the kind of man locals trusted with their children, their safety, their secrets. But reputations are fragile things. And when they fall, they tend to shatter loudest in the towns that once worshipped them. Detective Lisa Hendricks had everything she needed. The voice recordings. The surveillance footage. The autopsy report. Aiden's confession. The pieces aligned like a perfect storm, and at its center was the man sworn to uphold the law. Lisa didn't make a scene when the time came. No press. No dramatic showdown. Just a quiet knock on the sheriff's office door at 7:43 a.m. before the station opened. Hartley looked up from his desk, clearly not expecting her. Lisa? Something wrong? Yes, she replied, stepping inside. You're under arrest. His face paled. For a second, he said nothing. You're making a mistake, he finally said, voice low. I don't think I am, she replied, pulling out her phone. She tapped the screen. The audio began to play, his voice, recorded on Aiden's flash drive. The sheriff stood, slowly. That's not admissible. Lisa tilted her head. It doesn't have to be. Not when Aiden's prepared to testify. Not with everything else I've got. His shoulders dropped. The fight left his body. Turn around, she said quietly. She cuffed him herself. The news hit Brighton shores like a tidal wave. A sheriff arrested for murder. The community recoiled in disbelief. Local reporters flooded the department. Parents pulled their kids from school. Church leaders held emergency gatherings. How could this happen? How could the town's protector become a killer? Sheriff Hartley's initial statements, through his lawyer, claimed he had acted to defend the future of his son. That Riley was manipulating a vulnerable minor. That any father would have done the same. But the truth was harder to twist. Forensic analysis confirmed there were no defensive wounds on Thomas Riley. The trajectory and repetition of the blows indicated a targeted, intentional attack. And then came the timeline. The warehouse camera. The absence of any 911 call regarding a break-in. The traffic logs. The metadata from Thomas's journal entries. The truth was clear, Sheriff Hartley lured Thomas Riley to that warehouse. He staged a scene. And he lied to an entire town to protect himself from scandal. In court, the prosecution moved quickly. First-degree murder. Abuse of power. Destruction of evidence. Obstruction of justice. Hartley's defense attorneys argued diminished capacity, that his actions were clouded by paternal fear, emotional collapse, and panic. But the jury didn't buy it. Not with the recording. Not with Aiden's calm, heartbreaking testimony on the stand. When Aiden took the stand, the courtroom was silent. The boy trembled as he spoke, but his words were clear. He said I would thank him one day. That killing Thomas was mercy. But I never asked for that. I never wanted any of this. Gasps filled the gallery when the audio was played aloud. Hartley's voice, cold and calm. He had to go, Aiden. He made you weak. I'm saving you. The verdict came in under 5 hours. Guilty. Sheriff Douglas Hartley was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The courtroom erupted in stunned whispers. Some people wept. Others simply stared ahead, unable to reconcile the man they once admired with the monster now in chains. And in the back row, Lisa Hendricks sat alone, her expression unreadable. Justice had been served. But the cost was incalculable. The sentencing of Sheriff Douglas Hartley sent tremors through every part of Brighton shores. For a town built on a sense of order and tradition, the fall of its top lawman left more than just a vacancy in the sheriff's office, it left a gaping wound. People whispered in grocery store aisles and hushed tones filled church pews. No one wanted to believe it had happened here. But it had. And for those closest to the tragedy, the aftermath was only just beginning. Elaine Riley, Thomas's estranged wife, hadn't spoken publicly throughout the investigation or trial. Her grief had been quiet, guarded behind drawn curtains and missed phone calls. But after the verdict, she packed a single suitcase, left a resignation letter on her desk at Brighton Shores High School, and vanished without a word. A neighbor reported seeing her car head north before dawn. No destination. No forwarding address. Just gone. Elaine had already been halfway out of the marriage when Thomas died. But the scandal, and the betrayal that came with it, left her with nothing but a name in headlines and the haunting echo of a life she no longer recognized. She left behind their home, their memories, and a town that would never again speak her husband's name without a pause. Meanwhile, Aiden Hartley remained at the Trauma Treatment Center upstate. His caseworker, Dr. Marta Kessler, later described him as quiet, emotionally fractured, but deeply remorseful. He met with therapists daily, working through layers of trauma that had festered for years, not just the night in the warehouse, but the months of secrecy, manipulation, and the moral dissonance of loving someone you're told you should hate. Under court protection, Aiden was excused from media interviews. No photos. No cameras. No further contact with his father. The press speculated endlessly, where would he go? What future was left for the boy at the heart of a scandal that broke an entire town? But Aiden wasn't thinking about the future. Not yet. His days were filled with silence, walks through hospital gardens, and journal entries he never showed anyone. Some nights, nurses heard him cry out in his sleep. Other nights, he'd sit by the window for hours, staring out as if searching for something he'd never find again. He never once asked to go home. Back in Brighton Shores, the police department underwent a sweeping internal review. Detective Lisa Hendricks, once regarded as second to the sheriff, was promoted to interim chief, a title she accepted with reluctance. She knew the weight that came with it. In her first public statement, she stood at the courthouse steps, facing a wall of flashing cameras, and said, "What happened here was a betrayal of public trust, of professional ethics, and of a young man's innocence. There are no easy answers. But I promise this, what was once hidden will stay hidden no longer." There was no applause. Just silence. A town still stunned. Still grieving. The warehouse was eventually demolished. The site cleared and leveled. Plans were made to build a community center there, a place for healing, the mayor said. But for those who remembered, no building would erase what happened in those rusted walls. For every person who walked those streets, the tragedy served as a living scar, etched into the foundation of Brighton Shores itself. Not just a story of a murder, but of choices made in silence. Of protection twisted into possession. Of secrets that didn't just destroy lives. They dismantled a community. The ocean no longer sounded the same in Brighton Shores. It used to soothe, a soft chorus behind everyday life. But now, for many, the crash of waves against the docks echoed like memory, unrelenting, impossible to ignore. The town tried to move on. Storefronts reopened. Kids returned to school. City council meetings resumed. But underneath the normal rhythms, something fundamental had changed. Every whispered conversation in the coffee shop. Every half-second glance at the warehouse lot now turned construction site. Every time someone mentioned the case, only to trail off into silence. The truth had hollowed them out. The scandal hadn't just taken a man's life. It had exposed a truth no one wanted to face. That people in power, even those who wear badges and smile at parades, can cross the very lines they're sworn to uphold. That silence doesn't protect, it corrodes. Detective Thomas Riley was buried on a stormy Saturday in late spring. His funeral drew crowds too large for the chapel. Some came in mourning. Others came for answers they'd never receive. There were no eulogies. Just a reading of his service record. A folded flag. And a closed casket. No one spoke of the investigation. Not directly. But the weight of it lingered in every strained handshake and stiff embrace. Elaine Riley didn't attend. Her absence hung in the air like a question no one dared ask. Aiden Hartley stayed under psychiatric care for nearly a year. Then, quietly and without fanfare, he was transferred to a group home for young adults recovering from trauma. His name was changed. His record sealed. And for the first time since the night of the murder, he was allowed to simply exist. No longer a victim. No longer a suspect. Just a boy trying to piece himself back together. Those who worked with him say he rarely spoke of Brighton Shores. Only once did he reference Thomas, scribbled in a therapy exercise he left on the table after a session. He was the first person who ever listened. And the last person I should have trusted. Lisa Hendricks, now officially Chief Hendricks, kept her promise to the town. She overhauled department policies. Required therapy for all officers involved in trauma cases. Implemented stricter reporting protocols for mentorship programs. But the weight never left her. In the quiet hours after shift, she'd often find herself listening to old voice recordings from Thomas's case file, not out of obsession, but as a reminder of how close the town had come to burying the truth forever. And of how fragile the line between protector and predator really is. Years from now, Brighton Shores may look different. The community center may rise where the warehouse once stood. Children may laugh in a playground built atop the soil where silence once reigned. But some memories don't fade. Some names, some faces, some stories, they become warnings. The story of Sheriff Douglas Hartley and Detective Thomas Riley isn't just about love, or betrayal, or murder. It's about power. It's about fear. And most of all, it's about what happens when the truth is treated like a threat, instead of a responsibility. In Brighton Shores, they still say the sea swallows secrets. But every so often, the tide brings one back. And when it does, it leaves behind a truth no one can ignore.